Have you ever watched The Bachelor or Bachelorette? If you have, and you're like me, you are absolutely devastated to find out that they almost never stay together. How does that happen? Well, I'm MysterE, and this is Mysteries, Mysteries. And today you're going to find out why those true loves never seem to last. So, this topic is based off of this concept called classical conditioning. Now, most of you have heard about Pavlov and Pavlov's dogs. If you haven't, I'll give you kind of a brief synopsis of this. So, there was an immunologist named Ivan Pavlov who was doing this research on dog spit. He was like studying their immune response in their saliva. So what he did is he brought all these dogs to him, and he had this plate of meat powder, which I guess dogs really love. The dogs would smell the meat powder and they would start to salivate. They would start to drool all over the place. Then what Pavlov started to do is he started to ring a bell. Okay. And he would ring a bell and then he would present the meat powder and the dogs would salivate. What Pavlov ultimately figured out was that he could ring a bell and the dogs would start to salivate. And he called that salivation psychic secretions, which is a little weird. So he came up with this concept, this idea called classical conditioning. And what you have is you have a conditioned stimulus, which is what starts out first. So in this case, it would be Pavlov's bell, the ringing of the bell. The bell would be presented. It would be followed by the unconditioned stimulus, which would be the meat powder. And the dogs automatically salivate to the meat powder. So following the presentation of the meat powder, the dogs would salivate, and that salivation was called the unconditioned response. So then what Pavlov ultimately learned was that he could ring the bell and the dogs would salivate. So when the dogs would salivate to the ringing of the bell, this is what he called his psychic secretions, that would be the conditioned response. So I was thinking one day, in just the way I do, that how many other walks of life have we seen classical conditioning where we may not have even known it existed? Well, I'm an athlete. I was an athlete, and I also was a coach for a long, long time. And about 15 years ago, I was driving to, I don't even know, a store, whatever, and National Anthem came on, and my heart started to beat really, really fast. And I'm like, what is going on? And it was a baseball game between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Baltimore Orioles. Don't like either one of those teams. But my heart started to race. And I'm like, where did this come from? And being MysterE, I thought about it a little bit and I came to this conclusion. While I was growing up, while I was an athlete, the national anthem would play. And then I would participate in a basketball game where I'm running around and my heart's beating fast and, you're sweating, you're getting super nervous, that sort of thing. So I realized that my conditioned stimulus was the national anthem, followed by the unconditioned stimulus, which was me playing in a basketball game, followed by my unconditioned response, which was my heart racing, sweating, getting nervous, that sort of stuff, this natural response. And then all of a sudden, I was trained to get nervous and to have my heart beat fast every time the national anthem would play. Yeah, we're all conditioned in one way or another. You just think about that. All you need to do is look at your dogs or your cats, and whenever you get near the treat drawer and they run towards you and you're like, why are you running at me? That's classical conditioning. So if you're still with me, you're here because of The Bachelor or Bachelorette. So, hate to burst your bubble, but there's a reason why they don't always stick together. And of course, it has nothing to do with them meeting each other and knowing each other for 2 weeks. Okay, that might have something to do with it. But there's actually a whole lot of classical conditioning that's taking place as well. So here we go. Let's think about this. So they step out of that limo and they see this person and, handsome, beautiful, whatever. They see them and they are greeted, and that face is meshed in their mind. Then they walk into a room in a mansion with a beautiful view. And you have all of these other competitors that you're going against. So think about that basketball game, right? You have all of these other competitors that are going up against you to try to get this person to like you the most. You also have these cameras pointing on you. You have all of this stuff occurring. And I'm sorry, but your heart is jacked, right? You are probably doing everything you can to not start sweating and just to keep it together, right? And so you have all of this stimuli, this competition, these beautiful scenes, and then you get into the dates, the group dates, and all of this stuff. You're riding in helicopters. Come on, give me a break. Anyway, you're doing all of this stuff that gets your heart racing, right? And while you're doing this, there is this constant, this person's face, whether it's the Bachelor or the Bachelorette, right? So, what ultimately happens? The conditioned stimulus is this person's face. The unconditioned stimulus is the competition, right? The beautiful scenery, the vacations that are incredible, this 24 hours of nonstop craziness, right? And then you have your unconditional response, which is your heart racing, you're sweating, that sort of thing. Well, the crazy thing happens. You have that physiological response. Now what you have is you have the conditioned stimulus, which is the person's face, right? Well, when you met the love of your life, what happens sometimes? Your heart beats fast, you get that funny feeling in your stomach, that sort of stuff, right? So instead of this conditioned response being the heart racing and the increased respiration and all that sort of stuff, of course it is because you see that person's face, but it's not because of your love for that person. It's actually because of this competition that you've been in for the last several weeks. But you misconstrue that as being this love for this person. Now, you might say, well, yeah, maybe you do really love them, that sort of stuff. Well, they get together, and whether they get married or not, they're together for 2-3 months, and you're seeing that face. But alas, you're not going on those whirlwind adventures. You don't have the camera pointing at you. You don't have the competition of that person. And all of a sudden, your heartbeat and respiration isn't kicking in like it used to. So then you're realizing, wow, those flutters went away really, really, really fast. Why is that? Well, it's more than likely because you were conditioned to feel like you were in love with that person when really it was just your physiological response to the excitement of the competition and the beautiful scenery and that sort of stuff. So over time, many of these relationships are going to dwindle because that intensity that they experience during this what is it called? Like this dating experience, I guess you could say. It is so intense that there's no way you can live up to that. And we could talk about passionate love and companionate love, and maybe someday we'll discuss that in another podcast. But ultimately, that power, that physiological response goes away because the more and more you see their face, the less and less your heart beats fast, your pupils dilate, that sort of thing. And that process, when that physiological response goes away, and that love goes away is called extinction. And if we tie it back with Pavlov's dog, the more they hear the bell without the presentation of the meat powder, they're going to stop salivating. The more I hear the national anthem, the less my heart's going to beat fast if there's no competition that follows. So that idea of extinction plays a huge role in why these relationships become extinct. So I hope that gives you a really good idea, a really good understanding of why these bachelors and these bachelorettes don't last for the long term. But that's just a little classical conditioning perspective on it. I want to thank you for listening today. I also want to give a shout out to my executive producer and director, Bear Wade from Unify Creative Agency. If you are ever looking for somebody to market, whether you're an influencer or you run a company or you're starting to do startups, anything along those lines, he's the guy to talk to. Thanks again, and stay tuned for the next one. Remember to hit subscribe and make sure that you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.